There is a popular Stephen Covey story about taking a trip on an airplane. Before taking off, the pilot has a very clear destination in mind, which hopefully coincides with yours, and a flight plan to get there. The plane takes off at the appointed hour toward that predetermined destination. But in fact, the plane is off course at least 90% of the time. Weather conditions, turbulence, and other factors cause it to get off track. However, feedback is given to the pilot constantly, who then makes course corrections and keeps coming back to the exact flight plan, bringing the plane back on course. And often the plane arrives at the destination on time. This unless, of course, there's a snowstorm or fog at either end of the trip. Now, we are in year 4 of financial market turbulence, and we've been making regular adjustments to keep your plans on track with the help of our team of internal and external experts. Tonight, we have 3 experienced and successful managers of money to get their thoughts on trends that will help us to make the adjustments necessary to keep you on track to your goals during this turbulent period. Welcome to Wealth Stewards Outlook 2023 this is the 3rd in this series. It is Thursday, March the 2nd, 2023. I'm Bob Simpson, Vice President, Portfolio Strategy at Wealth Stewards, and I will be your host this evening. My usual partner, Paul Tyers, is off on assignment, but is listening in. Now, this is my favorite event and venue of the year. You know, it's a time we can all relax. We can learn about things before the snow melts away and we change our clocks in another week or so. For tonight's Outlook event, we have chosen rather obvious topics: equity markets, interest rates, and real estate markets. Equity markets have been highly volatile since COVID crept into our lives in 2020. Interest rates were cut to near zero and then shot higher in an effort to cool runaway inflation. And real estate markets had a strong surge with lower rates and then slumped as rates rose again. I believe that under these circumstances, there's no better time to bring together our distinguished and diversified panel of specialists. Before we begin, I just want to let you know that there is a Q&A button on the Zoom control panel. If you have a question, just post it there. We'll try to address every question possible. And don't be intimidated. Really, there's no bad questions. If you have a thought, put it up there. Now, without further ado, let me introduce our first guest speaker, Dolores Bamford. Dolores is joining us this evening from Boston, serves as Co-Chief Investment Officer for Eventide and Senior Portfolio Manager for Eventide's dividend growth, multi-asset income, and fixed income strategies. She has over 25 years of experience. As you probably saw in her bio as you tuned into this, she'll be answering some questions for us today about values-based investing. This is an area that's been growing steadily, but it's still fairly new, and it's really starting to garner some attention. So we're happy to be working with Eventide, and we'll begin offering some of this service to our client base in the near future. So Dolores, welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight. And I'm going to jump right in with questions. I want to start with, can you elaborate for us on what values investing? So it's not value investing, right? It's values investing.
Right.
And how you're addressing the growing need of investors really to align their investments with their personal values and beliefs.
I'm happy to, and I'm really excited to join the panel and start your panel discussion. I'll share with you what Eventide is doing and our approach to values-based investing. Eventide, as you said, is an investment firm that offers high-performance investment strategies focusing on investing in companies that we believe are creating value for the global common good. And our investment team, our philosophy and process are focused on really investing excellence through human flourishing. And we do this by evaluating companies' impact on their customers, their employees, their suppliers, their host communities, the environment, and society as a whole. And we're doing this by evaluating their products and their services, their business practices, their strategy, as well as doing deep due diligence on the management team. And this is all in addition to financial analysis and fundamental analysis. And our philosophy is really grounded in our values, which include respect and freedom of all people, concern for justice and peace, promoting family and community, and the importance to us for ethical investing in ethical management teams and responsible business practices, as well as the practice of environmental stewardship. And for the strategies that I lead, the dividend growth strategies and the multi-asset strategies in particular, we're focused on investing in high quality companies that generate dividend growth for human flourishing, not dividends or dividend yield at any cost to the world of well-being. So we're not going to be profiting from companies that are exploiting people, harming people, killing people, but we're going to be focused on dividend growth through honorable means and for human flourishing.
Yeah, so it's a bit more, Dolores, than just the typical ESG thing that we hear all the time, right?
Right.
You know, you might find a company that's got a good ESG score, but could be doing some horrible things.
Right. Exactly. So we're taking a much more comprehensive, holistic approach, and we're starting from what I say is like the inputs to a strong management team, a strong culture, a strong product, as opposed to just the outputs that you're talking about. That's from the ESG perspective. To really investing in a company that we think is going to outperform its peers by serving society well and contributing to the world and well-being. So that's the difference.
Right. So you use the term human flourishing. Can you just talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, so we're trying to contribute to positive things for restoring society or restoring well-being or health. Like healthcare is a good example of it, or different types of innovations that would help contribute to society or well-being. Different types of products that could be addressing specific types of human needs or different types of challenges in society or for businesses. So products and services that are really what we think having a positive impact on well-being. So that's what we mean, as opposed to being exploitive or harming or causing addictions or killing people or contributing to that. And so those are the key differences.
Yeah. So are you finding that more of the high net worth investors are starting to gravitate towards values-based investing? Especially in the current environment, that we're going through a difficult period.
Yes.
Are people not just worried about dollars and cents and earnings per share and price earnings multiples, but you're finding that people are more looking at their own personal values as they invest?
Exactly. I think even similar to myself, and investors are becoming more thoughtful and discerning about what products or what businesses do they want to contribute their money to, right? What they want to contribute to their capital. Are these products or services in line with their values? Would they be proud to know that their money is going to this company or for this product? If this product is killing people or it's causing addictions or it's harming society or the environment, people are becoming more concerned about that. And I think what I'd like to share with you all is that, I have almost 30 years of investment experience, and my career journey and my investment experience has really led me to values-based investing, or what I would call virtuous investing. And I have experienced and seen a lot of negative consequences of corporate short-term profitism, greed, arrogance, and just bad leadership, bad management. And when management puts profits above everything else, and not about how are they generating those profits, are they serving others well, then the shareholders those that own the stocks and the bonds are eventually will bear the negative consequences. And I've seen that and experienced that over my career. And that has made me more and more focused on this and thinking that's sort of like at the ultimate end of a quality investing or excellence, investing in excellence. And this thinking about profit or returns without any cost to society, or not thinking about the cost to society and well-being is really, I think, becoming more and more of an issue to a lot of investors. And so I think there's a great need there.
Mhm. No, I did get we actually have our first question. I think we have time for it. The question from Jim was, a lot of investor literature argues that ESG/values investing leads to results that are better or worse than, for example, the S&P. Can you comment on that? So I think the question is, by doing the right thing for the world, are we giving up performance, or can you compete with, because like that's the one thing we hear a lot. Like people say, well, how are you doing against the benchmarks, right? And sometimes we're investing for another reason, but can values investing compete with the major benchmarks?
So my answer is yes, but you first of all need excellent investors, right? You can't avoid having a strong, experienced investment team. So that's critically important. You need good investors to be pursuing values-based investing. You need strong investors in order to achieve strong performance, right? You continue to need to do the financial analysis, do the risk-adjusted return analysis, strategy, product, fundamental analysis. All that is still important, right? But this is on top of that, right? This is now, after doing the financial analysis and the fundamental analysis, that you are also putting this through an extra criteria or due diligence and making sure that these companies are also doing it for a good purpose. And I believe that outperformance then is more sustainable, right? Because by doing this, by companies focusing on serving society well, or their customers well, or their employees well, that it's a virtuous circle, right? That will enable them to outperform their peer group, right? And outperform the industry. And even and particularly now in these difficult times, right? In a lot of volatility and a lot of macro uncertainty and a lot of sectors under a lot of challenges, that we need companies that are going to be serving their customers well to help them get through challenging times. And that, to me, I can invest in and achieve resilience and strong performance through this strategy and through this type of investing.
Okay. And I think I have another question, but it ties into where I wanted to go next. So a question from Riyadh there. But my question is, can you elaborate on some themes in the area of values-based investing that you're currently excited about? And Riyadh's question was, are there indices that assess the values aspect of companies? So maybe tie those together. I think they're similar.
Yeah, there are different types of indices that can get at certain aspects of what we look for, but I haven't found an index as of yet that really approaches values-based investing the way we do. And there are many themes that we're very excited about. And I know that we're in a very tumultuous time, and there's a lot of uncertainty and volatility in the economy as well as in the equity markets. But there is a lot to be excited about and a lot to be proud of in equity investing right now. And there are a lot of really great themes out there that can enable companies to outperform the indices and outperform the economy by focusing on, I would say, very honorable and value creating themes. And some of them are, I'm just going to list out, there are a lot of them, and we can, go into some of them. But I'd say in general, how we look at it, for our higher growth funds, we are looking at companies that are innovators or disruptors that are really transforming the world or people's lives, particularly like in biotech or in healthcare or healthcare sciences. And then in our more dividend growth funds area, which is what I lead, we are looking for solutions providers or enablers that are helping their clients with their greatest needs or through these challenges that I've shared with you. And a lot of that can be the themes that we're focusing on there can be many in technology in terms of cybersecurity, global payments, education services, technology solutions and software for small businesses, enablers of e-commerce. Other areas in the dividend growth area that we like a lot now are those that are providing electrification, enablement, water technology, filtration, renewable, low carbon energy, various types of insurance or benefit products, innovative products and services that reduce energy consumption, which is significant right now, particularly in Europe, and reduce emissions for their customers, as well as improve air quality. And also we continue to support investments in the housing area and food sourcing, responsible food sourcing quality. So there's just a lot out there that we think are going to contribute to strong returns over time, as well as contribute to resilience right now in terms of financial and operational resilience in these uncertain times.
So one of the things that I've always believed is that good investment managers generally start out by narrowing in the sandbox, right? Looking at a tighter sandbox, because it's hard to make judgments on everything. But through the values-based investing, you've still got a pretty broad sandbox, don't you, by the sounds of things?
We do. It does not hold us back from being very well diversified and having a plenitude of investment opportunities out there. There's no sector, large sector that we don't invest in, and we can continue to look at those companies within those sectors that are really contributing positively to society and creating value and serving their customers and clients well. So, but we do have high standards in terms of the types of companies that we own and the type of management teams that we invest in. And as you all know, that it all starts with leadership, right? It all starts with the management team. So that's critical to us. The type of competitive advantages the companies has, the type of returns they're generating, their ability to have strong pricing power as well, and margins and strong cash flow. So all of that together will lead us to a high conviction portfolio of great ideas.
One thing that's really fun tonight is that we've got lots of questions pouring in. Dean was asking a question. He said, COVID created greed, false shortages causing crazy price increases in commodities and real estate and borrowing money. Does values-based investing take this into account with the companies that you look at?
We definitely look at how the profits are being generated, right? And what is the source of the profit? I think that's what the question is asking. And is it fair? Are there predatory lending issues, or are there different types of exploitation going on? So we absolutely look at the sources and the environment and the types of products that are being offered. And I absolutely understand what you're asking too, is that, are you looking for potential bubbles, right, in different markets where there could be just an overextended valuation as well? So we absolutely are focused on that and look for that and try to avoid areas and understand what's going on in the industries, the dynamics as well, and how the profits are being generated. Is it sustainable? And by what means is it being generated? And is it doing it in a way that is really creating value and helping others? Or is it for greed, as you were saying, or for exploitation, or for margins that are unsustainable?
Okay. Now, just because, Dolores, we're trying to keep it dead on time, I appreciate that. Was very insightful. We appreciate that you've shared your thoughts with us today, and you'll hang around for a few questions at the end for those that I have in the stack right now and some others, right?
I certainly will.
Awesome. Thank you. exactly on time. Now, Dolores used the phrase a few times, something we're really excited about. And one thing that I'm really excited about is Morley Green. Morley's an interesting guy. He's the chairman and CEO of Tres Capital, and he joins us from Vancouver. His background in structuring large property acquisitions and mortgage transactions for lenders and borrowers led him to establish Tres Capital, one of Canada's most highly respected firms in the private real estate industry in 1997. And he's joining us tonight to provide us with some insights into real estate investment trends. So Morley, welcome. Thanks again for joining us this evening.
Oh, Bob, thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure to speak to you and to your audience. Just great. I'm really happy to be here with you.
Yeah. Now, Morley, I could probably make a statement. You're a bit of a unicorn in today's investment community, in that interest rates have been declining since the early 1980s. And you are one of the few people who are still kicking around that have been in a market where interest rates have been rising. There just aren't a lot of people like yourself who are still around. So what I want to do is, you've seen this before, but you specialize in real estate investing, and maybe you can just start out by sharing with us that why in times like this should people own real estate?
I tell you something, Bob. You're right. Fortunately, I've been around a long time, and I've been through the early 80s when rates were 20%, and I've been through COVID when rates were zero. And there's kind of no good time or not any bad time to invest. Every time, but real estate, and we specialize in real estate financing. We're not all over the world. Not one day doing car loans. We're just doing real estate financing. And I tell you something. The great thing about real estate investing is that someone else is paying you for it. So yeah. You buy a piece of property and you put a mortgage on it. You get great leverage. You rent it out, and the tenant pays the rent. From that rent, you pay your operating costs, you pay your mortgage, etc. There may or may not be a little bit over. And every day that property is becoming more valuable because you're paying your mortgage down. Forget about it going up in value, and it does go up in value 4 or 5% at the worst of times. So you're improving your equity position in that property. Second of all, owning real estate, there's some tax advantages. You get capital cost allowance in Canada, depreciation in the States, which is a non-cash item that lets you reduce your tax load from that asset. So these are just great. And also real estate has been one of the traditional hedges against inflation. As inflation goes up, rents go up, things go up, and you've got that property, you have an original cost, and yes, your operating costs may go up, but that's about it. And I think it's the best time. It's a great time. There was no good time or no bad time to buy real estate. It's what you're paying for it each time. If you properly finance it, you go through the good times and the bad times, you come out the other end. And people have made great fortunes by holding real estate patiently, and it's a patient investment. You can't just take it into tomorrow it's going to go up or drive up. You get periods like that, but you're counting 4 or 5% growth every year, and that's really it. So I think we're believers in it, and real estate is an inefficient market. So it's not like the stock market they think is more efficient. But it's so because it's an inefficient market, you have opportunity to make buys that people don't see. With proper stewardship, with proper underwriting, etc., you can really understand the real estate market. So yes, Bob, I think now is a good time to buy real estate, and we're doing it right now. We're buying real estate, we're developing real estate, we're properly financing it, and we're making money for our investors.
Yeah, it's funny, Morley, that when you go to a store and you see that there's a for sale sign up and it says 40% off, then you're excited. When equity markets and real estate markets are down, it's like everybody's running for the door going, oh, geez, it's going to go lower. I better stay away. You've probably made some money buying dips in the past, haven't you?
Well, I know what buying dips are. We started in the height of the COVID in January of 2020, we started 2 apartment blocks against everybody's advice in Austin, Texas. And when we started those buildings in January 2020, we were pro forming about $195,000 unit sale price. We sold them last December, January, closed in January for close to 300,000 a unit. So I know we got lucky on some things, but you know, well-located real estate always sells. And by the way, cap rates don't follow interest rates lockstep. And you know, there are people buying real estate today at 4.5 caps, maybe sub 5, and they see the long-term value in it. And I just think that you got to look at each deal in by itself and make that decision. We're very tough on that. You know, it's real estate. At the end of the day, great fortunes are made by people holding real estate patiently over the years. And you know, you buy a piece of real estate, you pay it down, rents go up, your mortgage goes down, you create your equity. The cash flows increases. Sometimes you pay the mortgage off, and then for sure you have huge cash flows. And but it's a patient business, Bob. It's not something that you're not throwing dice. You just got to sit there and wait it out.
You're not trying to buy it on Monday and sell it on Friday?
No, not at all.
No, you might get a little bit of the paperwork done in the week you buy it, right?
So it's important when people buy real estate, they properly finance it. And sometimes you get lucky and things change, you go up a lot. But a properly financed real estate in good areas and good cities, you know, where you can't go too far wrong.
Mm-hmm. Now, Morley, I think everybody probably on this call understands the concept of investing in their home, right? It's a place you make an investment, you live in it, and you make some payments, you try to pay it down, pay it off, and you have expenses and upkeep and that sort of thing. How is that different than the work that you do, where maybe you're buying an apartment building or you're doing a build to rent community that you're financing or involved in the ownership of it? So what's the difference really? Is it pretty similar, or is it quite different, the difference between owning your home and owning commercial real estate?
You know, Bob, I think it's a huge difference. I think when a person buys a home, it's often an emotional decision. You want to live in a certain area, you want a certain lifestyle, you want certain things, you want 4 bedrooms because you got 3 kids and your mother-in-law is going to come live with you. So all those things are really important when making that decision. And because there's no income per se, you got to think, what can I afford? And where's it going to, and you pay the mortgage down, and you don't live off your house. And I've encouraged a lot of my people, to tell you the truth, to buy as much house they can afford and just pay it down and be quiet about it. And I've seen it happen time and time again. People have done that. And historically, houses have gone up in price, up in value in good cities. And people have, you know, while they don't think of it going in, it becomes one of their largest investments. I think when you're buying commercial real estate, as we buy for our investors and ourselves, it's different. We have to analyze the building. We have to make sure it's a well-built building. As you do when you buy a home, we have to make sure it's an area that people want to live in and we can rent it out. And different kinds of real estate too. We made the decision about 5 years ago. We weren't going to do offices. We weren't going to do much retail. We want to stay in the residential market because we saw that as a continuing people need. And, you know, like in the States right now, they figure they're about 1.7 million homes short per year. And in Canada, the next 2 years need an extra $100,000 per year, an extra 100,000 homes per year to be built to meet requirements. So these are things that you got to look at when you're buying real estate. You know, you go in, you got to look at the tenant list. If you're building it, you got to make sure that you finish it off on time. You finance it properly. And you make a whole set of very dispassionate decisions that you don't make when you buy your house and or you build your house. And I think it's very important that people understand that. And most people really, you know, just because it looks nice doesn't mean it's a good building. And so we try and do all those kind of due diligence to make sure it's there. And then it depends on the sector. So for example, office buildings, while they look great, are often very, very challenging because office tenants can move on a dime. They can move across the street. A guy builds a new building, they can move across the street. It's not their home. Retail a little bit better because it's a business and people develop a business in a retail center and people come and do it. Residential is great because people have to live somewhere, especially the next number of years they're going to live somewhere. So it's the least risky as well. The challenge we really with often with residential or multifamily is that there are controls on rent, and you got to think about that too. What does it mean? So these are all the things you got to think about from that point of view. And as I said, when you buy a building, you want to make sure you finance it properly, and you want to be able to have cash flow, and you don't want to over-lever it. And these are things you got to look at when you're buying real estate for investment as opposed to when you're buying your home. And these are very important things along the way.
Yeah, so Morley, you started this business in 1997, and it's still only you, right? You haven't built a staff or anything, have you?
That's wishful thinking, Bob.
Yeah. How many employees do you have?
We have close to 180 people working for us today.
How many is that?
180.
180 people.
And when I listen to Dolores talk, and I'm just so impressed with what she was talking, what they're doing. But what we find for ourselves, and what's really important, is that we like to diversify markets, but we want to stay in the markets that are strong. And so we like boots on the ground. So we're very big in the Southwest United States, Texas, Arizona, Florida. I mean, that are growing like crazy. When we started in Dallas in 2009, just kind of when in the bottom of the whole recession, and because we could see and we took. I wish we had done more, but the city has grown by 2 million people since we've been there, and it's just outstanding. 1,000 people a day move to Florida. These are outstanding numbers that we look at. So that we got to look at all those demographics. But the advantage that we have, we spent the money of establishing offices. So Morley Green isn't flying into Dallas to look at a building and leave the next day. We have a team there that looks after Dallas and Houston, that area. And the growth has been so spectacular. I mean, you think of it this way, Bob. Texas is virtually the same size as Canada, and with a higher GDP. And so when we're in Dallas, within 1 hour of Dallas, forget about the rest of Texas, there's 18 million people. So we've gone to those hot spots, and it's proven very, very successful for us. We're renting a building right now in Dallas that we built, and we're 35% over pro forma rents. And what we're doing, we're refinancing, taking some money back, etc. But that's because we have local people, local knowledge, and we're not developers, Bob. I got to tell you, we're financiers. We finance the developer. So what's really good is for our investors, we're on the same side. It's not like there's a problem that we're looking after ourselves. We're looking after them, and that's really important to understand that when you're hiring people to do stuff with you. Because I had friends who lent some developer a problem in Calgary, he got in trouble, and the developer, he was looking after himself, not after my friends who've given him a bunch of money. And with our case, we don't make our money unless we bring the project home for our investors. So it's important. But real estate is a local business, and you can't say that Dallas is like Miami or Dallas is like New York. They're different. And what you don't want to do is pay the dumb tax. And so we've tried to avoid paying the dumb tax by being a market that we have people that we know what we're doing. And every market's different. Can't compare Seattle to Dallas.
You gotta have feet, boots on the ground, and
on the ground.
And you have some wonderful people like John Hutchison down in Florida, who's one of my favorite guys, other than Vikram, because I'm sure Vikram's on the call and wanted to hear that. But
I would tell you, you're talking. Just talk about John for a minute, because he's I met John in 1994. Just so you'll know this. That shows how long we've known each other. And and we were on the opposite side. He was the president of a home building company out of Houston at that time, and I was a lawyer, and I was doing a deal for my clients in San Antonio, and Don and I tussled, and we became really close friends after the deal was signed, and we stayed in touch. And he's the guy that brought me to Dallas in 1997.
Yeah.
I mean, in 2009, 2010. But there's an example of a guy he's been in the house building business, he's been in the real business for, I don't know, for more years than we care to remember. And so he knows what he's doing. He's seen it all. And so you just can't replace that. When you're doing a building, and like he knows everybody in Dallas, and so he knows all the crooks. And so if you're flying in from Toronto to Dallas to make a loan or to do something, like, you don't know who's good and who's bad.
Don't mess with John Hutchison is the bottom line.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. And Morley, let me move on, but kind of just a final thought about the favorite song of people in Texas is The Only Living Boy in New York, because everybody's moving out of New York to Texas and Arizona, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much. Appreciate your time, and going to move on to our final panelist of the evening, Sean Rogister. He is the CEO of Cortland Credit, who most people who have been working with us have had investments with Cortland for a while. He has more than 20 years of experience leading investment teams in fixed income strategies that include private lending exposures in emerging and developing countries like Canada, probably an emerging country. And he's going to provide us with some insights into interest rate trends. So Sean, thanks for being so patient, and but I'm sure you probably learned a lot listening to Dolores and Morley as always. But
yeah, excellent presentations. Yeah, I always I've known Morley for a long time, and Dolores just had some great insights. So yes,
exactly.
Thanks very much for having me, Bob.
Yeah. So I'm going to start you off with a question, which is that, I have sort of a favorite saying lately, which is that, when somebody asks why investors have been experiencing such volatility and discomfort lately, I just say blame it on the Fed and the Bank of Canada. So maybe you could start out by sharing your thoughts about what you believe the Fed and the Bank of Canada are up to, and what the forecast. I know it's always hard to predict the future, especially when you're dealing with governments, that sort of thing. But what do you see, as we look forward at interest rates and what the Bank of Canada and the Fed are going to do in here?
Well, yeah, Bob, you started off with talking about, a flight path for a pilot and how he gets buffeted by winds or storms and he gets slowed down or even stopped and then restart, and he's still got to make it over time and adjust as he go. But we've seen some very, very major changes in some macroeconomic variables, and that's what I think the central banks are dealing with a lot. So inflation in the last year is at levels we haven't seen since the early 80s. We saw it hit 9% in the US and 8% in Canada and over 10% in the Eurozone. And all the major developing economies have had this, but they've all come off those highs a little bit. So that being said, interest rates generally have risen with inflation, but not as much. So inflation is still a major issue, since when you buy a bond, you're looking for that bond to mature in 5 years or 10 years, whenever you think you'll need the money. And you want the purchasing power of that maturing bond to be able to buy the goods that you think you'll need at that time. And if interest rates are in general below inflation, then your purchasing power is going to get reduced. And so inflation is really a major issue, and certainly one that affects the bond market more than other sectors. And interest rates have not risen as much as they should have, given the level of inflation that we've seen. And as a result, overall economic growth has remained positive and employment has been strong. So in the US and most major central banks, they've got these mandates. In the US, it's a dual mandate where they're worried about price stability and maximum sustainable employment. Last unemployment number in the US was 3.4%. So unemployment's at very low levels in most of these regimes, and certainly at levels that central banks are confident feels like it's under control. And the Bank of Canada is like most other major central banks, and it's only got one mandate. It's got to worry about price stability, and it sets a target for inflation at 2% with a range of 1% either side. So, 1 to 3%. And they are currently well above that level. So major central banks have all got to worry about keeping their monetary policy rates high to get inflation back to their mandated level. It's not like they kind of make a call, well, we think it's going to be okay. They've got an 18-month window that they think it's going to be impacted before the impact of their rate changes will hit. But they've got to get it. They've got to be very conscious that their job is to get inflation back down. So they're going to keep interest rates high for a while, in my view. And whether they can get it down quickly is up in the air. Right now, they're forecasting in the U.S. 3 to 4 25 basis point hikes in the next 2 quarters. So, in Canada, they're pricing in one more hike in the next 2 quarters. And after that, currently the markets are pricing in interest rates will start to decline, that they'll fall by 1% or 4 25 basis point reductions in 2024. I'm going to suggest to you that may not be as likely as people would like it to be. A lot of investors have been talking about interest rates topping up, but after seeing yields as low as 0.6 in 2020 on 10-year bond yields, now in the US, they went over 4% today. That's the first time we've seen that level since 2008. And in Canada and the US, we're seeing Canada a similar trend to the US. My bank told me 2 days ago that if you're looking to buy a home, lock in your mortgage rate now. They'll give you a 120-day lockup rate as you're going out looking for a home. And during that period, you'll be able to, maintain the rate at the same level as it is today. And they're saying lock it in because they generally feel that interest rates that they set on mortgages are gonna have to rise a little bit. So my view would be that the trend in interest rates is still to higher levels for the next couple quarters and maybe to the end of this year.
Until you start to see that some progress has been made on inflation.
Yeah.
Now, there's more than one inflation number though, right? Like when, the target of 2% that's a core inflation number, or is that's not the
in Canada,
9% number that everybody talks about?
Yeah, it's a very good point. So in Canada, they actually just call it the Consumer Price Index, but central banks will be a little bit, they want some flexibility on that. They'll say the number they really watch, and this is more of a US model, the number they really watch is that core number after taking out the volatile food and energy prices. So if you don't need to eat or drive a car, those are relevant. But for the average person, those are of significant impact, and it's something that you should be aware of, in my view, if you're worried about the purchasing power of your money in a couple of years. And in Canada, they just use a straight CPI, and that's the core mandate that they have to attend to.
Yep. So do you believe that, I think one of the problems that we have with today's consumer is that they just don't know how to deal with higher interest rates. They all believe that money's free. It's always going to be free. And now, now they bought a couple of properties because they only really needed one, but yeah, I can carry 2, but now at current rates, they're getting squeezed. How do you see that we overcome that thinking of people today?
Yeah, it's a very big problem, especially in Canada, places like Canada, where you have high consumer debt levels. And a lot of that is money tied up in their home or in credit cards, and interest rates at high levels make it expensive for them. Absolutely. trying to be build your nest at home and buy a home for starting for a new family, or a couple that are starting to get their feet on the ground. That's difficult. And at the same time, there's kind of a shortage of houses, so rental rates are going up as well. You're absolutely right. I'm basically saying to you that as much as we would like to help out those people, the capital markets aren't going to do that for you. I think there's a trend towards slightly higher rates still, until the central banks are able to get their monetary policy and rates above inflation for long enough that it brings inflation rates down. And we've seen this a big problem with supply chain as well. If you look at inflation as being an environment where demand for goods is greater than supply, and therefore people are willing to pay, that's a big problem with supply. And we're still seeing that with shipping challenges, especially with the war in Ukraine causing a lot of international strife. It is not easy to overcome these things. And so I would say to you, it continues to be a problem for a lot of commodities and things like that as well. It's still, as much as natural gas prices may be low in Canada, internationally, it's a real challenge for them to get them. And it takes a long time to build the liquefied natural gas control ports and be able to ship that particular commodity. So it is a challenge on the supply side, and that'll continue for a bit.
Yeah. No, Sean, I wrote an article. I don't think I've given it to anybody yet, but I entitled the article, Baby Boomers Have Been on the Wrong Side of Interest Rates for the Last 40 Years, right? That when, early stage baby boomers, that when we were buying places, we were paying 14, 15, 16% interest rates. And now that we're retiring, rates were zero, right? And how do you get that return? Now, so this is taking us off course of the things that I thought we talked about today, but I know that you can handle that sort of thing.
Yeah.
From an investor point of view, thinking of the baby boomers, and people are looking to generate income and have maybe been frustrated by equity markets. Is there potentially a better way through private lending and the kind of work that both you and Morley do?
I'm trying not to be too salesy. I think you've got to be very conscious that the work that Morley and I do is on Morley may be involved in the longer term perspective on things than I am. We're doing short-term secured lending, and we set the lending rates as a spread over prime rates. And our borrowers are very conscious that that is the cost of their funds. And so they're well aware of it. And then we do it with a floor. So we're hoping that if interest rates do fall, that we'll be able to maintain some decent yields for a while. So the challenge for investors is when traditional bond prices fall, the yields rise and their returns decline. And in our strategy, they're floating rate based assets, so returns rise with it. It's a good strategy for diversifying into real assets that are going to have real returns that keep up with inflation. And I suggest to you that's a very strong area that investors are looking to. And it's in part, it does get on side with some of the topics that we brought up. You asked me to think about where are things going in the next couple of years and how does that affect pools like ours. And I would say to you, getting kind of back on track, but maybe just as a segue, that there's an area of the biggest area of allocation for institutional investors that they are all saying they're going to focus on in the next couple of years is on private debt. And it's almost like this is becoming an area that is no longer an alternative, but a standard part of their fixed income portfolio. And what they're seeing is they really need that diversification on the investor side away from traditional fixed income strategies. And I would suggest to you that that leaks into equities as well, because just as a point of one of those data points that I'm always doing research on different trends and what the historical numbers will say to you. And if you look at the traditional equity bond portfolio and look at the history of that traditional portfolio going back to the beginning of data time, which is the early 19th century, early 18th century, 19th century, prior to 1920, the 2022 was the worst year in the history of data available on the capital markets. And yet strategies, and I don't want to be too salesy, but the short-term secured lending area that we're in had its best year ever. And it's been around for over 10 years. It's maybe even longer for a lot of institutional investors that were able to figure out how to jump into that space. But this was the best year ever. So it's an excellent source of diversification and a critical area because it's an absolute return strategy. And therefore, real assets that people should get involved in. And that's why you're seeing so much demand for this area by the institutional investors that have the ability to get involved.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Now we're going to move into the Q&A because I think we got a lot of things here. Hans said, and I think this is for Dolores, what role does energy, oil and gas sector play in a portfolio, and what percentage of their portfolio would it comprise?
Great question. And this, I think, dovetails nicely with what Sean was talking about in terms of the global energy crisis and what's going on in Europe. For our dividend growth strategies, we are invested in energy, not necessarily as much on the exploration or production side, but on energy infrastructure, energy pipelines, and midstream, particularly in the US, that are contributing to getting gas and liquefied natural gas out of the country into Europe and to Asia, and to participate in the energy transition globally from dirtier fuels, right, like coal, into cleaner fuels and renewables. And so those energy sources that help for energy security, reliability, and eventually clean energy and low carbon energy is important. So we're involved in those types of companies that are solutions providers, enablers for that transition to safe and clean and reliable energy. So right now it's about something like 7 or 8% of our funds at this point. We also have exposure to companies that are delivering products that are helping with energy efficiency, right, and emission reduction. And so we have that theme of energy and energy security and high energy prices and the need for energy efficiency and to reduce emissions and carbon is a significant theme that we're playing in industrials, utilities, as well as in the energy sector.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And just so we can kind of keep things rolling, let's try to, I think we have a lot of questions, so let's try to just keep key points.
Short answer.
Short answers, yeah. So Carl's asking the question, I think maybe this is for you, Morley. It seems to be a trend in the residential market that companies like Brookfield have been buying to rent homes and developing whole new subdivisions to create communities with rentals. Is that something that you're seeing? And I know the answer to that because I just went on your tour in Texas, Morley, but maybe you can address that.
Yes, it's become a big thing. It really started during the great financial recession where people were buying homes, one off different places, now doing whole communities. We're doing a ton of financing in that area right now, and we're partnering with Hines Group Building to Rent. He's 100% right. It's a huge market. People want that. They want to live in their own home. And the other thing, part and parcel of that, by the way, is this kind of single family kind of apartment type homes that we're financing for a number of builders. So he's right. It's a huge market, and they're getting thousands of homes. Brookfield, other people are, and renting them out. We've been financing the development of them. Then they take us out by Fannie and mortgage in the States, or different things down in Canada. And it's a huge business going to be, and especially with homes becoming more expensive, people are renting as opposed to buying a lot. But although I would tell you, Bob, I got to tell you this, that because we're one of the largest financiers of rental of people who are building homes for sale, and they had amazing months in January and February. I can't believe how strong it was.
Okay, Sean, one of the questions here is, GIC rates are up. People are excited. They can see 4 or 5% now. Is the work that you do, can you compete with those kind of rates today? And I know the answer as well.
we lend at prime plus 5 to 9 with a floor of 8 to 10%, depending on the borrower. So we really do have a portfolio where the real rates that net of all fees that we earn for investors have been very reliable, because it's a controlled environment. We have great collateral supporting it, but the returns are always going to be above the interest rates on most traditional bond strategies and GICs. Now, they're not guaranteed by a bank. They're guaranteed by the extensive amount of collateral provided by the small to medium companies that would love to be big enough to get financing from a bank. So they're willing to give us a direct and senior secured claim on those assets. And if anything ever goes wrong, we have appraisals. We know the assets very well. We have weekly calls with most of our borrowers where we know that their bank statements that we see online have to tie in to the collections they're making on their accounts receivable. Their valuations all have to make sense, and they know that they have to give us good information. Otherwise, we're going to stop the funding, and we have the ability to do that very quickly in the portfolio. And we also, on a side note, are now collecting all the information that groups that are focused on sustainability and responsible investing are doing, and we automatically collect that with the weekly data updates we get from all our borrowers. So we're very close with them, and I feel that this is very much like traditional bank financing without the guarantees, but it's the same kind of assets that support it. So I think it's a better than traditional assets, and it's real floating rates where your liquidity is a little better than a traditional GIC.
Okay, thank you. Harold has a question, which is, I think, for Dolores. Higher interest rates, how do they bode for bank stocks over the next 3 quarters? And conversely, what's the impact that higher mortgage defaults have on the banks? What do Canada's all about the banks up here, Dolores, right? It's, our banks compared to US banks are, it's quite a different market. But I don't know, do you ever look at Canadian banks in your portfolios?
I'm not an expert on Canadian banks, although I'm interested in learning more. But in general, in the US, it depends on if the bank is asset sensitive or liability sensitive. And if it's liability sensitive, very sensitive to deposit rates going up, then we do think it's going to be problematic for them to pay, higher deposit rates. So it depends on how they're positioned. And so in general, you have to understand the business model and how they're positioned against interest rates. But in general, if we're going to see the consumer weakening by higher interest rates, it doesn't bode well. So be careful.
Okay. Now, there's one that I almost missed, and thank you, Shelby, for pointing it out. But again, Dolores, with regard to ethical investing, would you eliminate companies in certain countries? And if so, which ones?
We would definitely be careful about investing in specific countries or country exposure, for risks of, for instance, like slave labor and, corrupt governments and bribery. And so we're very, very careful about exposures in specific countries. And, there's a lot there. So we're mostly focused in the US and developed countries.
So again, tighten up your sandbox, right?
Yes.
And James has a question. Now, in your portfolios, do you primarily use funds, REITs, LPs? What kind of, or you're mostly an individual?
For me, for my funds,
Yeah.
we can own in REITs, most likely, C corps, less on limited partnerships, loan portfolios, so more
Okay.
plain vanilla.
Right, narrowing it down, Morley, couple of questions about affordability. What's the solution to for people who are trying to buy homes? How are we going to solve the affordability problem?
The affordability problem, ever since I was a young kid, there's always been a affordability problem. And across the board, and people do buy homes. It's gotten out of hand the last number of years, but people have bought homes because interest rates were so low. I think the government's got to find some way to allow more homes to be built. That's the only way it's going to happen. The government has to stop taking so much money. I mean, here in Vancouver, the government, every home, the government takes $100,000 to build a condo. That's all their fees and levies, and then it's 5 years to start a development. So I think a lot of it stands with the government. They have to open up more things. They have to make it more efficient to allow people to build more and to build faster and cheaper. And that's what from the individual side, people are buying smaller homes now than they did before. They're putting down a bit more money, and it's a challenge. But that's why rentals are so strong right now because of that. And I don't see a way out of the affordability problem the next several years. I think it's there. Huge demand for homes. Immigration is causing that. There's a shortage of homes in the marketplace. And I don't have an answer except that the government has to make it easier on building new homes and allowing that to happen. In the States, what's really happened in the States, because they've gone up in price, in the States, you can take a 30-year mortgage with Fannie Mae or the different things, 30 and a fixed rate. In Canada, we don't have that. So every 5 years, you take a 5-year mortgage, it resets, and that's what's happening. But the government has to change the way it's doing business. It's not the federal; it's the local municipal governments, and there are places in Vancouver great that they don't want development, so everything goes up in price. So it's not a simple answer, Bob, to say do this or do that. And I would tell you, stopping foreigners from buying homes per se is not an answer either, because what happens, the way the legislation is written, you can't even have a foreigner help you finance the acquisition of land to build homes. So that's a challenge. And these are major problems, Bob, and it's not simple.
But affordability, as you said, has always been a problem. I remember when I bought my first house back in 1987, I think. No, 1982, I think. And I couldn't believe, how was I going to pay that mortgage? It was crazy. It was, I had to stretch for affordability.
That's right.
Anyway, this has been a lot of fun. As a moderator, I love these sort of discussions. I learn so much. And, when else do I get the opportunity to sit down with three panelists of the knowledge and experience that we had this evening? We do appreciate the time that everybody's taken from their busy schedules to join us tonight. That's attendees, panelists. We are recorded. This has been recorded. We'll send out a link to those of who attend. And if you know somebody who you think should have watched this, friend, colleague, somebody at work, send them the link, and let them spend some time with us on the recording. Now, we do a lot of these. Sometimes we do them live like this one, sometimes they're recorded. Everything is posted in our due diligence library, that if you don't know the password to get in there, you don't know how, talk to your advisor. If you're not currently a client of our firm, let us know, and we're happy to let you in to see what's up there. But Sean, as an example, meets with us every quarter to talk to us about what's happening in his portfolio there. Also, I just want to throw a special thanks to Shelby. Shelby is the producer of these events. She does an amazing job, keeps us on track, and edits these things and makes it and posts them so that you can all see. So I know that she enjoys the applause that's in the background, even though she can't hear you. But a long evening. We try not to. We promised an hour. We're about 5 minutes over. And we appreciate everybody coming out, and thanks Dolores, thanks Sean, thanks Morley for doing this, and we'll connect with you real soon.